Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is Friday, so that means we're doing Deadly Days. I don't think I've had a chance. No, I did post one of these because I did the Las Vegas shooting and then I got sick. So we're back. This is the second segment on this. I'm so sorry that it's been so wompy this month and last month. I intended to do this properly in August, and then I got really sick. I'm still sick. I'm not sick, but I'm like stuffed up still, so yeah. So bear with me. We're gonna do this. It's kind of a doozy. It's a long one. I like long ones because I feel like there's more to discuss. But yeah, with that being said, let's get into it. Here's your graphic content warning. We talk about murder, we talk about death, we talk about all the bad things, we talk about pew-pews, we talk about being unalived, we talk about suicide. Alright, so, going forward, let's get started. The Virginia Tech shooting was a spree shooting that occurred on Monday, April 16th, 2007, comprising 2 attacks on the campus of the Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, or Virginia Tech, in Blacksburg, Virginia. Seong Hoi Cho, sorry if I didn't say that right, an undergraduate student at the university, killed 32 people and wounded 17 others with 2 semi-automatic pistols before committing suicide. 6 others were injured jumping out of the windows to escape him. Cho first shot and killed 2 people at West Ambler Johnston Hall, a dormitory. 2 hours later, he perpetrated a school shooting at Norris Hall, a classroom building, so more people, where he chained the main entrance door shut, so like the doors that you walk in that are supposed to be left open in case of emergency, like when the school is in use or whatever. He chained those doors like together so that you couldn't open it just by pulling them. And fired into 4 classrooms and a stairwell, killing 30 more people. As police stormed Norris Hall, Cho fatally shot himself in the head. It was the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history and remained so for 9 years until the Pulse nightclub shooting. I have covered that before. I think it was last June during Pride Month, so I will find the video and link it in the description box. It remains the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history and the deadliest mass shooting in Virginia history. Not the U.S. Let me make it clear. Not in the U.S., but in Virginia. The attacks received international media coverage and provoked widespread criticism of U.S. gun culture. It sparked debate about gun violence, gun laws, gaps in the U.S. system for treating mental health issues, Cho's state of mind, the responsibility of college administrations, privacy laws, journalism ethics, and other issues. News organizations that aired portions of Cho's multimedia manifesto were criticized by victims' families, which rightfully so, because don't put a nut job's words out there. Like, what? And I think in some ways, kind of, to me, or the way I understand it, it kind of downplays what he did, because they're all like, oh, well, he was mentally ill. I mean, I'm mentally ill. I didn't go out and kill 32 people. Like, there's nothing that they could have said or done that would have made this acceptable, per se. So I agree with being upset that that was even something they felt necessary to report on. But I also understand from the media side that there is 2 sides to every story, and they have to present all the facts, whether they want to or they don't. Well, they should, I should say, because some don't give all the facts. Cho had previously been diagnosed with selective mutism and severe depression. During much of his middle school and high school years, he received therapy and special education support. After graduating from high school, Cho enrolled at Virginia Tech. Because of federal privacy laws, the university was unaware of Cho's previous diagnoses or the accommodations he had been granted at school. I don't know. Now, I was on an IEP in high school, and when I went to college, that did transfer over. I don't know why in this case it didn't. I don't know if maybe documents were lost or misfiled, or somebody just didn't do the right paperwork, or what, but yeah, for some reason those accommodations did not follow him as they should have. So that is obviously a problem. In 2005, Cho was accused of stalking 2 female students. Again, a situation where I'm like, maybe you should have, like, looked into that a little more. After an investigation, a Virginia special justice declared Cho mentally ill and ordered him to attend treatment. Because he was not institutionalized, he was allowed to purchase guns. That's something that should be fixed. The shooting prompted the state of Virginia to close legal loopholes that allowed individuals adjudicated as mentally ill as mentally unsound to purchase handguns without detection by the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. It also led to the passage of the first major federal gun control measure in the U.S. since 1994. The law strengthening the NICS was signed by President George W. Bush on January 5th, 2008. Okay, about this. As somebody who's mentally ill, I agree with this wholeheartedly. You should not give people who are unwell in their head access to weapons. And not so much because, every one of us is going to go off and murder a bunch of people, because not everybody's like that. But we sometimes act in impulsivity and could hurt ourselves. And that's why I don't want a gun in this house. I don't want a gun. We have one. I just don't want one. But, my parents have one too, and I just, I don't personally want to touch or have to use it. I mean, I guess I would if I needed to, but I don't know, just the depression part of me thinks about it sometimes, and so I get why there's this mental background check, and I'm sure some of it too is to make sure that those that are homicidal aren't also, gaining access to those weapons. So I do understand it, but just to make this clear, not every single person in the world with bipolar disorder or BPD or schizophrenia or etc. is going to go out there and murder a bunch of people, because a lot of us aren't like that. We're just trying to figure out how to cope with our own lives. And then there are just some people who just take it too far, and you'll never really understand why, because it's different for every person who has it. It's just like, another illness or autism or whatever. Everybody who has it is different. But the majority of us tend to internalize our anger instead of going after other people. And that's why I think we shouldn't have access to those kinds of weapons. Not because, like I said, not because we would hurt others, but because we would probably hurt ourselves. And it's just better to not have that option. Administrators at Virginia Tech were criticized by the Virginia Tech Review Panel, a state-appointed panel tasked with investigating the incident for failing to take action that might have decreased the number of casualties. The panel's report also reviewed gun laws and pointed out gaps in mental health care as well as privacy laws that left Cho's deteriorating condition untreated when he was a student at Virginia Tech. So from what I understand, this guy literally just fell through the cracks of the system, and that is unfortunate. But it does not on any level excuse what he did. There were 32 people who did not have a choice that day whether they were going to live or die. There's 32 people that are buried before their time because somebody else decided to do something. So I understand that he slipped through the cracks. I understand that he was not getting the treatment and therapy, etc. that he needed, but that is not an excuse to do what he did. The shootings occurred in 2 separate incidents. The first incident was in West Ambler Johnston Hall, a residence where Cho killed 2 students. The second incident was in Norris Hall, an academic building on the opposite side of the campus where the other 31 deaths occurred, including that of Cho himself, and all the non-lethal injuries occurred. Cho used 2 semi-automatic pistols during the attacks, a .22 caliber Walther, P22, and a 9mm Glock. Cho was seen near the entrance to West Ambler Johnston Hall, a co-ed residence hall that houses 895 students, at about 6:47 a.m. So, for him to have only killed 2 people in that dormitory is a thing of the gods, because at 6:47 a.m. most of these kids are either just waking up, or they're showering, or they're getting breakfast, or they're You know, they're just actively moving around. They're not all off to classes or whatever yet. And I am genuinely surprised that of the 895 students that were in there, only 2 were killed and or injured, because there was no injuries from there either. So, it's pretty impressive. Normally, the hall is accessible only to its residents via magnetic key cards before 10 a.m. Cho's student mailbox was in the lobby of the building, so he had a pass card allowing access after 7:30 a.m., but it is unclear how he gained earlier entrance to the building. At around 7:15 a.m., Cho entered the room that freshman Emily Jane Hilscher shared with another student and shot Hilscher, a 19-year-old from Woodville, Virginia. After hearing the gunshots, a resident assistant, or an RA, 22-year-old senior Ryan Clark of Martinez, Georgia, attempted to aid Hilscher. Cho shot and killed Clark. Hilscher remained alive for 3 hours after being shot, but no one from the school, law enforcement, or hospital notified her family until after she had died. Cho left the scene and returned to his room at Harbor Hall, a dorm west of West Ambler Johnson Hall, while police and emergency medical service medical service units were responding to the shootings in the dorm next door. Cho changed out of his blood-stained clothes, logged onto his computer to delete his emails and his student university account, which that right there shows some thought process. That shows some premeditation, like, you know, you're going out to do even more than what you've already done, and you're leaving nothing to connect you to this school on purpose. That, to me, screams it was premeditated. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing was wrong. Most people who don't think they're wrong are not going to go through the efforts of cleaning up their mess, if that makes sense. Just saying. Just saying. And then remove the hard drive. He took his hard drive with him. That's another thing they usually don't do, unless you're a pedophile. Some of the PDF files will do that. Don't kick me out, YouTube. About an hour after the attack, Cho is believed to have been seen near the campus duck pond. Although authorities suspected Cho had thrown his hard drive and mobile phone into the water, a search by divers was unsuccessful. Almost 2 hours after the first killings, Cho appeared at a nearby post office and mailed a package of writings and video recordings to NBC News. These materials proved to be of little investigative value to authorities. The package was postmarked at 9:01 a.m. Around 9:40 a.m., Cho entered Norris Hall, which housed the engineering, science, and mechanics program, among others. In a backpack, he carried heavy-duty chains and locks, a hammer, a knife, 2 handguns with 19, 10, and 15-round magazines, and nearly 400 rounds of ammunition. With the locks and chains, he chained the 3 main entrance doors shut and placed a note on one, saying that attempting to open the door would cause a bomb to explode. From what I understand, there was never a bomb. It was just to kind of deter police from coming in before he had done what he was doing. But there was, as far as I know, this isn't like Columbine, there was no active bomb. Shortly before the shooting began, a faculty member found the note, took it to the 3rd floor to notify the school's administration. At about the same time, Cho had begun to shoot students and faculty on the 2nd floor. The bomb threat was never called in. The first call to 911 was received at 9:42 a.m. Cho geared up in a nifty room 200 before the shooting began. According to several students, he looked into several classrooms, likely to see how many people were in each room. Aaron Sheehan, an eyewitness and survivor who had been in room 207, told reporters that the shooter peeked in twice earlier in the lesson, and that it was strange that someone at this point in the semester would be lost looking for a class. At 9:40 a.m., Cho began shooting. His first attack after entering Norris occurred in advanced engineering class taught by G.V. Loganathan. So sorry if I said that wrong. In room 206, 13 registered students were inside. Cho shot and killed the professor, then continued firing, killing 9 of the 13 students in the room and injuring 2 others. After exiting the classroom, Cho fired down the hall at 2 students who were fleeing from room 204 next door. The fleeing students managed to escape down the stairwell across the hall. He also fired at another student and one substitute professor from room 205 who were peering out from the door, but they survived. He went into room 207, where instructor Jamie Bishop was teaching introductory German. Cho shot Bishop and some students near the door, then walked down the aisle shooting more victims. Bishop and 4 students were killed. 6 other students were shot and wounded. Cho then moved on to Norris 211 and 204, where he was initially prevented from entering due to barricades erected by instructors and students. Hearing the commotion from below, Kevin Granada guided 20 students from a classroom on the 3rd floor into his office where the doctor could be locked. Where the door could be locked, and went downstairs to investigate along with another professor, Wally Grant, where they were both shot by Cho in the hallway. Grant, who quickly fled into a bathroom, was wounded and survived, but Granada died of his injuries. None of the students locked in Granada's office were hurt or killed. In room 211 of Intermediate French, Jocelyn Couture Nowak saw Cho heading towards the doorway. She and student Henry Lee barricaded the door with a few desks while she yelled at students to get down on the floor and under their desks and call 911. She yelled for them to get down and under the... You basically told him where they're hiding. And I realize that desks probably are not the best hiding spaces anyway, because you can see under them. I'm just saying, like... Cho pushed through the barricade and entered the room, killing Nowak and Lee, who fell behind the door. A student named Matthew Laporte, who charged towards Cho and attempted to tackle him, but died after being shot 7 times during his attempt to save his class. Of the 22 students enrolled in this class, 18 were present at the time of the shooting. In addition to the professor, a total of 11 students were killed and another 6 were injured. The sole uninjured survivor, Clay Violand, played dead and was, alongside a wounded female student, one of only 2 people to walk out of the room as soon as police arrived. As in room 207, Cho fired into room 211 from the doorway and then walked up and down the aisles, methodically targeting potential survivors as they tried to hide. He did not say a single word throughout the shooting, and occasionally reloaded his weapon in the hallways before re-entering the classrooms to resume shooting. Now, I understand, I read somewhere that, kind of similar to the school shooter I did a couple weeks ago, he was like not using all of the bullets in the gun and just reloading so that he never ran out, if that like makes sense. But he always went back to the one classroom to change his guns out, or his ammunition out. And I don't know what the significance of room 200 was. I don't know if it was just closest to the doors. I don't know if it was just the first empty classroom we found that he set up in. I don't know if there was any significance to it at all. But he always went back to that empty classroom to reload and whatnot. For retracing his path, Cho returned to room 206. According to a student eyewitness, the movements of a student named Wally Shalon, who was already wounded, distracted the aggressor from a nearby student after he had returned to the room. Shalon was shot a second time and died. Also in the same room, another wounded student named Guillermo Coleman was shielded from more serious injury by having the body of student Parte Labantron. I'm so sorry. I know that's not right. Placed on top of him, but Coleman's various accounts made it unclear whether he pulled Partai's body over himself, or Partai had initially landed on Coleman after being shot the first time. 2 other students who were also in the room made it out alive. Cho had re-entered room 206 3 different times at this point. After his first entry to room 207, several students had barricaded the door and had begun tending to the wounded. When Cho returned minutes later, Caitlin Carney and spokesperson Derek Odell were injured while holding the door closed, but the remaining students survived. In room 205, students had already barricaded the door with a large table after graduate assistant Helan Shang, who was substituting for the professor, and a student saw Cho heading towards them. Cho shot through the door about 7 times, but failed to force his way in. No one in the classroom was wounded or killed. Across the hall in room 204, this one made me so sad. Liviu Librescu, a Holocaust survivor from Romania, forcibly prevented the gunman from entering the room by holding the door closed with his body until most of his students escaped through the windows. After kicking open the window screens, the students successfully escaped. Some suffered leg injuries while landing on the ground 2 floors below. Others survived after landing on the shrubbery just below the window, and then ran either to some ambulances pulling up or to the nearest bus stop. Librescu was shot through the door 4 times. 2 others who were lying in the corner near the windows were injured but survived, and described that after most of their classmates escaped through the windows and after the armed aggressor shot 4 times through the door, he finally forced his way in. Upon seeing the open windows and hardly any students in the room, Cho confronted Professor Librescu and student Manal Panchal, who was lying on the ground next to the door, and fatally shot both in the temple. He then turned to 2 other students who were taking cover and critically injured them before leaving and re-entering room 206 for the 3rd time. And the reason I said this made me so sad is you survived the Holocaust only to be taken out by a school shooter. The Holocaust. And taken out by a school shooter. You shouldn't have to worry about that now that you're not part of Germany's fucked up little plan anymore. You should not have to worry about that. You should be like, okay, so I'm gonna die from old age. Like, that's just really fucked up to me. At 9:50 a.m., 10 minutes after the second shooting began, a SWAT team started to enter the building. They were not able to shoot their way through the chain-locked entrances, but managed entry via a separate entrance. They went up to the 3rd floor, but heard from student Emily Haas, who was wounded and survived in room 211, Nowak's French class, saying that the gunman was in her classroom as she stayed on the line. As police started to descend the stairwell, Cho had already begun to hear the footsteps. He looked out in the hallway briefly before going back into the center of room 211 towards the windows, and just as police reached the 2nd floor, shot himself in the temple with the Glock 19 and died instantly. When police arrived at room 211, they saw Cho lying on the ground with his guns beside him, and some students who were either injured or playing dead heard the officer's first words, "Gunman down." During the investigation, State Police Superintendent William Flattery told a state panel that police found 203 remaining rounds of ammunition in Norris Hall on Cho, and later testified that the armed aggressor was well prepared to continue on. During the 2 attacks, Cho killed a total of 32 people, 5 faculty members and 27 students before he committed suicide. The Virginia Tech review panel reported that Cho's gunshots wounded 17 others. 6 more were injured when they jumped from 2nd-story windows to escape from Librescu's classroom. Sidney J. Vale, the director of the trauma center at Carleton Roanoke Memorial Hospital, said that Cho's choice of 9mm hollow point ammunition increased the severity of the injuries. Between the 2 pistols, a total of 174 bullets were fired by the assailant during the attacks. 28 of the 32 victims were shot in the head. The shooter was identified as 23-year-old Seong-Hyu Cho, a senior at Virginia Tech. He was a South Korean citizen with U.S. permanent resident status who was majoring in English. The Virginia Tech review panel concluded that because of Cho's inability to handle stress and the frightening prospect of being turned out into the world of work, finances, responsibilities, and a family, he chose to engage in a fantasy in which he would be remembered as the savior of the oppressed, the downtrodden, the poor, and the rejected. The panel went further, stating that his thought process was so distorted that he began arguing to himself that his evil plans were actually doing good. His destructive fantasy was now becoming an obsession. Police arrived within 3 minutes after receiving the emergency call from Norris Hall, but officers took about 5 minutes to enter the barricaded building. When they could not break the chains, an officer shot out a deadbolt lock leading into a laboratory. They then moved to a nearby stairwell. As police reached the 2nd floor, they heard Cho fire his final shot. Cho's body was discovered in room 211, which was Professor Nowak's classroom. And the aftermath, high winds related to the April 2007 nor'easter prevented emergency medical services from using helicopters for evacuation of the injured. Victims injured in the shooting were treated at Montgomery Regional Hospital and Blacksburg New River Valley Medical Center in Radford, Carlowan Roanoke Memorial Hospital in Roanoke, Lewis Gale Medical Center in Salem, and Halston Valley Hospital in Kingsport, Tennessee. Virginia Tech first informed students of the situation via email at 9:26 a.m. This was about 2 hours after the first shooting, which was thought at the time to be isolated and domestic in nature. After the full extent of the shooting became evident, the university canceled classes for the rest of the week and held an assembly and candlelight vigil in the following evening. On April 17th, Norris Hall was closed for the remainder of the semester. The university offered counseling for students and faculty, and the American Red Cross dispatched several dozen crisis counselors to Blacksburg to help students. University officials also allowed students, if they chose, to abbreviate their semester coursework and still receive a grade. The day following the shooting, a memorial event was held at Conceal Coliseum. The event included a speech by then-President George W. Bush. Anybody else feel like George W. Bush dealt with so much shit while he was president? Like, duh. The space reached capacity and overflow seating was accommodated at nearby Lane Stadium. Early in June 2007, Virginia Tech announced that it would begin to reoccupy Norris Hall within a matter of weeks. The building is used for offices and laboratories for the engineering, science, and mechanics and civil and environmental departments, its primary occupants before the shootings. Plans were to completely renovate the building and for it to no longer contain classrooms. The southwest wing of Norris Hall, where the shootings took place, was closed in 2008 and completely renovated in 2009. The building now houses the Center for Peace Studies and Violence Prevention, the Biomechanics Cluster Research Center, and the Global Technology Center, as well as other programs. Ambler Johnston Hall was also closed and renovated. The East Wing now houses the Honors Residential College, which opened in fall of 2011. In fall of 2012, the West Wing reopened as the Residential College at West Ambler Johnston. After the release of the Massagill report, some of the victims' families called for then-Governor Tim Kaine to relieve Virginia Tech's president, Charles W. Steger, and campus police chief, Wendell Flitcham, of their positions. Kaine refused, reasoning the school officials had suffered enough. Tech students of South Korean descent initially feared they would be targeted for retribution. While no official claims of harassment were made, anecdotal evidence suggested some Korean students were affected. I mean, let's be real, that's usually how it is. It's, like when COVID was a thing, people, because it came from China, the Chinese were being, targeted, businesses were being targeted. Let's be real, it happens. It happens. Everybody gets stereotyped. After 9/11, we had Muslims who had never been a problem that were targets of an attack or targets of hatred. The LGBT community gets hatred and they haven't even done anything. So it makes sense that there probably was some. Whether or not it was reported is another story, but I wouldn't doubt on any occasion that there was some hatred happening there. These shootings occurred as prospective students were deciding to accept offers from admission from colleges and universities. Despite this timing, Virginia Tech exceeded its recruiting goal of 5,000 students for the class of 2011. In the days following the shooting, the campus community received several thousand pieces of artifacts and messages of condolence arriving from over 80 countries and every state within the U.S. These included artwork, cards, poetry, and original music. These items were later gathered and photographed by the university library and are available online. President Bush and his wife, First Lady Laura Bush, attended the convocation at Virginia Tech the day after the shootings. The IRS and Virginia Department of Taxation granted 6-month extensions to individuals affected by the shootings. Governor Kaine returned early from a trade mission to Japan and declared a state of emergency of Virginia, enabling him to immediately deploy state personnel, equipment, and other resources in the aftermath of the shootings. 2 students at Pennsylvania State University dressed as Virginia Tech shooting victims for Halloween in 2007, posting their photos on Facebook, which generated outrage in both Penn State and Virginia Tech. Penn State sent a statement to Virginia Tech stating, We're appalled that these individuals would display this level of insensitivity and lack of common decency by dressing up in this manner. The fact that one of the individuals is actually from Virginia makes it even more difficult to understand. A Northern Virginia chapter of the B'nai B'rith U organization took on the name Levu Lebresco, AZA, in honor of the Holocaust survivor who used his body to barricade show from entering his room. Beginning with the first anniversary of the attack and continuing since, the Queen's Guard of the College of William and Mary, another public university of Virginia, has memorialized the victims with an honor guard at the head of the college's sunken garden. The honor guard is modeled after the honor guard posted at the Tomb of the Unknowns by soldiers of the United States Army's Old Guard. Virginia Tech holds a yearly day of remembrance for the attack, with events such as a candle lighting ceremony, a wreath laying, a moment of silence at 9:43 a.m., and a cadet guard at the memorial for 32 minutes. That's a really sad and fucked up story of the Virginia Tech shooting. School shootings are always hard, and it doesn't matter if they're kids, it doesn't matter if they're teenagers, it doesn't matter if they're adults. It's hard. You have to step back and think 32 people lost their lives. Well, 5 of those were faculty and 27 were students. Doesn't mean that the students' deaths were any more important than the faculty as well. Because everybody who was killed had a family, had somebody at home waiting for them to come home, had a pet, had, a kid, had a wife or a husband. Every one of these people had a life that was snuffed out unnecessarily and cruelly for absolutely no reason other than that he could. I will always stand by on school shooters that, if they don't take themselves out, somebody should probably take them out. But no, I don't have any compassion. I mean, I do on some level, I guess, because I do understand the mental illness aspect of it. But as someone with mental illness, and one of which he was diagnosed with, I could not personally see that solving my problems would require me walking into a dormitory of 895 students and shooting them. So there's more than just mental illness here, and if he wasn't medicated, it was by choice, which is another issue. Like, nobody's watching people like this, so I don't know. But in my opinion, I really feel like he was just a really bad guy. Like, you could have talked to anybody about your problems. The nurse, the psychiatrist, literally anybody about your problems, but instead you chose to handle them by taking out 32 innocent people. Not how we should handle our problems. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me. The makeup will be listed in the description box below for you guys. And I will try to find that Pulse Shooting nightclub video and put it in the description box down below. As always, please don't do anything I wouldn't do. Be cautiously kind to others and make good choices. Bye.